Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I am reviewing the Etchr Lab Cold Press and Hot Press watercolor sketchbooks. So excited to do it, so let's jump right in. Okay, so it's a regular old Tuesday as I'm filming this, but it feels like Christmas frickin' day, guys. I get to review these Etchr Lab watercolor sketchbooks in hot pressed and cold pressed. This is a company that I had seen advertised on Facebook and Instagram, and I have been looking for new paper because, as many of you guys know, with the pandemic going on, it's been a little difficult to find art supplies. And right now my go-to Arches watercolor paper is a lot pricier than usual and it's a lot harder to find. So, and I'm also running out. I'm on my last pad of Arches and I'm kind of freaking out a bit. So I've been trying to look for new paper, and I've seen a couple of reviews on this company specifically for watercolor sketchbooks. And while it's on the pricier side, they looked really awesome. And I was so fortunate that they reached out to me and wanted to send me some. So I personally asked for a hot press and a cold press because I do a lot of my illustration work on hot press paper and I do a lot of my floral work on cold press, and I was just curious about both, and they were so kind and sent these to me. So let's jump right in and open them. I'm so excited right now. Open. Oh, well, I broke it. It's all good. Okay, so this is the cold press notebook. Okay, and it's already has like plastic wrapping on it to keep it nice and clean and new, and oh my god, it's so pretty. Already I'm impressed because it's gorgeous. Okay, so here it is. Here is the cold press sketchbook. I'm very excited. So I've heard people mention that you can customize these yourself. So it's like a canvas and you can just paint and, you know, make it your own. I really like this cute little, I guess it's a llama. But yeah, so this size is, I think it's A4. So we're actually measuring it out. What is that? Almost 11.5 by like 8, which is wonderful. Nice big sketchbook. Ooh. I can already feel that it's pretty textured. I don't really know the specs of it because there's nothing written on this one. Okay, so I said there wasn't any info in here, and then I actually looked in the back, which is kind of cool. They have this little pocket so you can place more of your artwork in there if you need to. And then they have the paper with the specifications of the paper on it. So this notebook, or this sketchbook, is A4, which is 11.4 by 8.3 inches, landscape format. It is mixed media heavyweight paper, 230 GSM. So it is a little bit thinner than the 300 GSM that I usually use, but it seems to hold up great. It is 100% cotton. This one is cold pressed, the other one is hot pressed. Both sides can be used for painting, which I didn't know, and it's ideal for pen, ink, watercolor, and gouache. 52 sheets of acid-free paper. So those are the specs. This is really awesome. Okay, so now let's get to painting and test it out. And I'll let you know what it feels like. Okay. So far it's nice. The colors glide on nice and smoothly. Let's see if I were to add some. That's good. Now this paper is very textured. You can see that texture right through. So it has that nice watercolor look to it, watercolor paper look. Let's do. And while it's textured, it's actually quite smooth to paint on. It's not like too textured where it's like rough. It's actually quite nice. Let's get some darker. And I wouldn't typically paint with the palette on the sketchbook, but just I want to make sure it's in frame. So that's why I have it up here. So far the color bleeds are really, really nice. It's a very nice paper to work on. I'm also curious to see how it dries too. Let's do a lighter color. Like that. Look at those color bleeds. They're super nice, and the nice like gradient, and it seems to be staying wet and it's not drying really fast, which is something I have trouble with if it's not great paper. So that's a really good sign that it's still staying wet, because it gives you more time to do some wet on wet, you know, add some deeper color in there. It's pretty. Let me add a bit more darkness. Like that. Very nice. It's a little annoying to work on the sketchbook like this, but I just want to make sure you guys can see my palette and the book and everything. It's pretty. Some cute. So far, I'm quite impressed, and it's still wet. Like, it's still wet over here, so that gives you so much time to like go back and add things, fix things if you need it. It's very nice. I'm also really just curious to see how it's gonna dry too. So we'll come back and look at it when it's dry as well. So far, so good. I'm loving these color bleeds. Ooh, and one thing I'm noticing while it's drying, actually, because this one's drying a bit, when it's really wet, you see quite a bit of texture underneath the paint, but when it starts to dry, it dries a lot flatter, which is really nice. I like it. The gradients from dark to light and from color to color are so smooth. Wow. And like, that flower's still wet. That's amazing. And I'm filming under pretty like decently hot lights, and a lot of my paintings tend to dry a lot faster, especially when I'm working on cheaper paper, which I don't usually, but if I am, everything will dry so much faster. The fact that this flower was still like able to get a color bleed, and I did that second, is quite impressive. And I'm not just saying that because they gave me free sketchbooks. I'm not. Like, I would tell you if this was not ideal paper. And I think you would also see it too. And I'm telling you, if you see any kind of watercolor paper that says 100% cotton, grab it, because it just makes, I find, all the difference. That is stunning. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna let this dry and we'll come back to see how it fully dries. But so far, I am so impressed with this cold press paper. Let's open our hot press and test that out, and then we will, you know, talk about it at the end. Okay, so here is our hot pressed one. There we go. I love how they come in these like extra packaging. They're so pretty. Like, it's, you know, very well packaged. I love the clean look of the sketchbook too. Okay, so this one is hot pressed. And if you don't know, hot pressed is a smooth paper. Cold pressed is textured. Okay, yeah. So this feels like hot pressed. So I usually do a lot of my illustration work on hot pressed. It's a lot easier to draw with ink, and it just, it acts a lot different than cold press. Cold press, I find, you can do a lot of wet on wet. Hot press isn't ideal for wet on wet. It's more like doing small illustrations. So like my illustration series I did on hot press in my sketchbooks, love doing it on that. So let's see how this goes. Okay. So before I start painting, let's draw something out. I'll draw myself. I'm drawing at my table. So let's do Little sketch with pencil first. Okay, so now that I have my sketch, I'm just gonna go over it in pen, see how the pen reacts on it. So far, so good. And usually with my my illustrations, I haven't been doing a lot of pen work. So we'll see. I mean, I'm gonna use the colored pencils too. All right. Okay, so I've done a little sketch here. Have my paper. Now let's see how this erases as well underneath. Ooh, that's clean. That erases really well on that paper too. Huh, awesome. Okay, so let's see how it takes to watercolor. So let's start with making some of my skin tone here. Water that down. So I'm noticing that the watercolor kind of sits on top, kind of like it does with like a Canson paper, which is not ideal, like if I was doing florals, which wouldn't be ideal. But let's see how it dries. One thing I've noticed with other hot pressed watercolor papers is that on hot pressed, it pills, like there's like these little bumps, and they tend to go away when it dries, but this doesn't seem to have that bumpiness, is what I'm trying to say. It's so smooth though. Like it glides on so nicely, and it's taking the color quite well. Like it's sitting on top. Well, maybe I just used too much water there because the arms aren't doing that, but it's taking the color so well, and it's so smooth to paint on. Hot press paper does dry a little bit faster, so you kind of got to work a little bit quickly if you're trying to do some, you know, blends and bleeds and stuff like that. Okay, let's just do the painting. I'm just gonna put some gray on this paper. That. And then we're gonna wait for that to dry, just because I don't want my hair touching the shirt and then it bleeding together. So far, I actually really like this. This is really nice paper to paint on. It's so smooth and it glides so nicely. I am going to use my colored pencils on top of this just to see how that works on this paper as well, but so far, it's awesome. Okay, while we're waiting for this part to dry, let's check in on our cold press. Oh, you guys. Oh my gosh, yeah. This paper is so nice, and look how it dries. It's so seamless, like those gradients, like that purple that is bled into the pink, like it's just like it's seamless gradient. You don't get those weird watermarks. It's gorgeous. And the paper doesn't seem that thick, but it hasn't really warped. I'm kind of blown away. This is amazing. Beautiful. So happy with that one. Okay, and I've noticed that it's kind of lightened up a little bit too. The skin color, so maybe I'll add a bit more depth to my skin with watercolor before I go in with the colored pencils. It dried a bit lighter than I originally went in, so let's see. Okay, so now I'm going to use my Prismacolor colored pencils. I have more in here than I should, to do some like extra texture and shading and stuff. Ooh, that glides on really nice. Okay, so far, this is really nice to use. The pencil crayons, or colored pencils as Americans call them. I'm Canadian, we call them pencil crayons. It's really nice and smooth. It's like perfect for them. That's interesting. Okay, the way that the colored pencils draw on this is amazing. So the paper that I used for my illustration series, or that I use when I do illustrations, I've been doing in my Paul Rubens watercolor sketchbooks, and they're also 100% cotton hot press paper, and I really like the way watercolor works on those books, but I think the pencil crayons actually work way better on this paper. So the watercolors aren't awful on this paper. They're good. They're not as good as I think the Paul Rubens one is, but this has the other one beat when it comes to colored pencils. I really like that. That is really nice. Okay, so that's just a little drawing, but I have to say I am impressed with this paper. The watercolor was okay on it, but the way that the pencil crayons moved was amazing. So I'm very happy with that. And I think I'll just practice a bit more with the watercolor on the paper. I think I just need to use a little bit less water. I think I went in a little bit too heavy-handed with the water. Excuse me. But yeah, so I'm super impressed. So all in all, I have to say I am in love with these sketchbooks, especially the cold press paper. It's just more my style, especially for what I do. The 100% cotton paper makes a huge difference. I noticed right away when I started painting, the color really seeped into the paper and the colors were extra vibrant. Nothing just sat on top. It really moved well with the paper, which is so important, especially when you're doing some loose floral work or just watercolors in general. I am honestly so happy, and I think I'm gonna have to order more because I think I found my new paper. If you guys are worried about the price point, I know paper can be a little bit expensive, but the way I'm calculating it in my mind, you get 52 cold press sheets in this sketchbook when I typically buy Arch's watercolor paper, which only has 12 sheets in a pad. So really, the little bit of extra money that you're paying to buy one of these, I think is totally worth it. With that said though, it really depends on where you get your paper. I know right now Arch's is almost impossible to find, especially for a decent price point. With COVID happening, everything just seems to be through the roof price-wise. So if you are in the market for great paper and you don't mind paying for quality, that's exactly what you're getting with this. So I definitely suggest it. I've said this before, paper is probably the most important part of watercolors. I mean, you're gonna need to have some decent watercolors, but paper will make all the difference. So I hope this review kind of gave you an idea of what to expect with this paper and if it's actually worth it for you. If you're a beginner, I always suggest not to go and buy the most expensive watercolor materials. Work with what you can afford until you kind of get the hang of it and see if it's something that you actually love. Then invest your money in better quality materials. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I really hope you liked it and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram and Facebook for even more. Have a great day, guys. Bye.